And now we're talking about the global reach of IT. We have seen a lot of data center providers, suppliers, vendors that are servicing enterprise clients who demand access to services and provision of their IT infrastructure across borders around the world 24/7. This raises a lot of issues for the modern business that need to be addressed. How do you keep that IT infrastructure running smoothly and operating at the levels that you need to satisfy your clients? Thankfully today I have Sean Murphy and Zack Sexton from Procurri to talk about their experience with helping their clients support and run a smooth global IT infrastructure. Hi guys, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome.
Now, I mentioned there just a little bit about how people now, and I'm talking about end users that ultimately consume people's products and services, now expect those services to be working 24/7. They expect the same standards no matter where they are in the world. That raises a lot of issues for companies looking to support, build and grow their IT estates. So what have you seen across your client base, some of the challenges they're facing and how best to address them?
Yeah, so we've seen clients, particularly global clients that have needs to look at reducing cost in markets, stable markets, but still grow and still stay at the leading edge with cloud technologies and things. And so we see the job being more complex than ever, but today really IT is the business. And the customer experience, as you mentioned, through mobile and through digital is so important that the technology be on the leading edge that some of our customers are dealing with more challenges than they ever have. And at the same time, they've got to reduce cost because the world's getting flatter and more competitive. And so it's really a challenging time, but it's an exciting time. And we've seen some really successful outcomes by being to have local touch and global reach. So we've seen some really successful projects.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people now are winning business perhaps in their local markets, and with enterprises operating around the world, quite literally the sun never sets on their business. They're now being asked to support IT infrastructures outside of their native country. I mean, we're in the UK at the moment, but Zack, you're over from the US. So how's it dealt with in America?
Sure. So what you're seeing are there's a lot of companies that are American headquartered but have offices and reach in Asia Pacific, EMEA, Africa's Americas, what have you. And the decision making is coming out of the US. However, they don't know what to do to solve their problems overseas. So they have to call someone in Asia, they have to call another company in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. So Procurri's been an aggregator where you can say we can solve all your needs in-house with our global touch.
That's interesting. So a lot of the decision making comes out of one region, but the service and ongoing relationship lives in a different region. So that's quite a big challenge that faces a lot of, certainly if you're in the data center space and you have hubs in different areas, but you're servicing clients from different locations. How do they build their support structure to deal with that? Or is that something they should look to a company like Procurri to help them achieve?
So I think it's an interesting point. The customers are making decisions based on a historical support model, and that works in markets that are very well established. But when you go to emerging markets, you either have a choice of finding all new suppliers or trying to work with suppliers that have global expansion plans and global reach themselves. And so for our firm, we've tried to go to markets where our customers have large growth opportunities, India, Mexico, China. And so we've tried to go there ahead of them to be prepared. But either way, the customers are going to have to think about, do I want to do this myself? Do I want to partner? You're going to have to do things differently because in some of these areas, the depth of suppliers is not the same as it might be in Europe or America. So, from our experience, we like to make sure the customers have the right expectations, and we try to do a lot of the delivery ourselves rather than rely on downstream suppliers. We think the more downstream suppliers you have, the more risk you have of not a good outcome, and we want to make sure that we can guarantee quality, kind of time in and time out. And so that's why we are deciding to do it ourselves around the world instead of doing a partner channel. But we have clients that are actively looking all over the world, and they're surprised at how limited the choices are for suppliers when they get to these more emerging markets.
And it's kind of fascinating because the methodology, the thought process that goes on in one region doesn't always necessarily translate to another region beyond just simple cultural differences. People might have different buying ideas around whether they rent hardware, buy hardware, capital offsets. There's a lot of different things. I mean, we kind of bracket a lot into the cloud, but there is still IT infrastructure, stuff that can't be moved to the cloud, legacy issues, maybe refresh issues. There's a lot there that goes on that maybe subtle nuances come in, and how do you address those?
So when you think about Asia, Asia is made up of so many different countries that the concept of cloud is not going to be ubiquitous because people want to know where their data is going to be residing. So they're not going to want like a pan-Asian cloud. They're going to want to know where's my data going to be residing. So the location of the actual data center the cloud is being hosted will be important. For example, our headquarters is in Singapore. That's a popular location for our cloud. So that's one consideration, things like that. But second of all, you take a market like India where supply chains might have been 4 to 6 weeks to get product delivered. Customers in America or Europe, would be considered a very long time to wait, whereas it might be normal in a market like India. So these are, I think, expectations, Western expectations in these emerging markets is a real challenge. And that's why I think as people are adopting cloud strategies, trying to move to the cloud, trying to control cost, and try to open new IT locations in these emerging markets, it's really the most challenging time for IT leaders, probably in the history of the IT world. Today is probably the most challenging ever.
And what would you say are the big drivers out there? What's motivating a lot of the customer's customer, the end user, that now the client needs to shift and address the data center providers, the vendors, the suppliers? How is the sort of the landscape changing?
Well, sure. Well, it's changing in a lot of ways. So the traditional landscape, let's go back 10 years ago, was a reseller had a partnership with a distributor, and a partnership with the OEM, and they provided IBM hardware or HP hardware or Cisco hardware, and that's how it was. That's how all the IT buying process was done. But it's shifted. It's shifted in a way that people are going to the cloud, and they are going away from the traditional OEM purchasing. And as they're going to the cloud, they are making different decisions. For example, what do I do with all these assets that I'm getting rid of? Second, I have these assets that are going to the cloud and they're no longer under OEM support. What do I do with them? Do I look for a third-party maintenance provider? So those are some of the things that are changing in the marketplace.
So these are some pretty big challenges that are being faced. But how would a supplier who perhaps has won a new contract, is looking to win a contract with perhaps a global company, go about making sure that they are a credible supplier to those businesses?
So let me give you an example. We had a client that adopted a 3-year cloud strategy, and they had an idea to move certain of their functions to the cloud over the next 3 years. And in the meantime, they needed to grow their capacity, but that meant holding on to assets longer than they historically had. Mm-hmm. And so they have these assets now that were, say, in North America, and they need to relocate them to Asia. They're older, they're going to need third-party support. Who are they going to be able to do that with? They need to be able to be billed in local currency. So all these challenges. At the same time, they had this vision that the cloud was going to be cheaper. Well, here's the news alert. For so many people, the cloud is not cheaper. Because they are kind of the pioneers of doing it, they've moved to the cloud and it's turning out to be more expensive. So our clients are saying, listen, I've got to save money. I've still got to do things very quickly, but I've got to really mind the budget. And so we see clients, these global projects that have got to come in faster, less expensive, and then who are you going to trust? And so there's all these decision drivers, and most of them are to deal with global situations that eventually will end up in the cloud, but they're not there yet, mainly because the applications aren't ready. So it's going to take longer. But for companies like Procurri, that's what we're here to do, to support you when things don't go the way you planned. We're here to help you through this entire transition of life cycle. Some of the older companies that were the original OEMs, they really like the customers to be buying new assets all the time. We don't have an agenda like that. We're here for the customer. If it takes longer, that's fine. But everything we do is got an eye on cost because the cloud is turning out not to be cheaper. And that's really a shock to the system.
Yeah. Well, it's that old adage really, isn't it? It's the big issues that need addressing are the business issues, not the technical issues always. And I think as things move forward, a lot of suppliers do need to bear in mind what are the business drivers that perhaps aren't explicitly put into a requirement sheet or aren't there on a specification that they actually need to address to help their customers. So guys, we're short on time now, so I'm going to thank you very much for joining me. That was Zack and Sean from Procurri.